Marketing for the now, marketing for the now, marketing for the now. 10 minutes, 12 remarkable guests for 2 hours answering a singular important question. Are you ready, Gary? What do you think?
Welcome, everybody, to Marketing for the Now. Gary, you had some pretty big news drop this week.
I did. Lots of stuff going on in NFT land. Seems like big news for many projects all the time. So fun stuff on that front.
Wow.
Thank you. But I'm fired up about today.
Excellent. Well, we've got one question for today. You can see it right there. How do you create and sustain an entrepreneurial culture? And we're lucky to have first up the queen of Clubhouse, Swan Sit. Swan has had an incredible career with senior transformation roles with brands like Nike, Revlon, Estee Lauder, and she's now advising her 3.5 million followers on Clubhouse and consulting companies and leaders of tomorrow. Welcome, Swan.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Swan, let's just go right into the question because these go so fast. They're only 10 minutes. You've had the luxury of being in big organizations, right? You've had the luxury, especially in your last year and a half, of what you've been able to build for your personal brand through the explosion of Clubhouse and the evolution of that, which brings you much closer to the entrepreneurial spirit. We together, me as an executive at VaynerMedia and you, always had a great relationship in the different companies you were in. We never got to go all the way there and work together, but you've been around entrepreneurs and around corporations more than most, which is why I thought you were a tremendous person to start this show with. So in its lamest terms or in its most complex undertone, how do leaders create and sustain an entrepreneurial culture?
I have this barbell approach because, as you know, I worked at companies like Nike and Estee Lauder, but I co-founded an energy drink called Annie with some TikTokers. So I've got this barbell approach, and even being in corporate, digital transformation is all entrepreneurship. So one of the first things I always think about is in entrepreneurship, people always say fail fast and fail cheap. But if you fail in corporate, you get fired, right? So as a leader, your job is to take a hit for your team. If you want your people to fail, you can't punish them when they take those calculated risks. So it doesn't matter if you were there or if you even knew about it. When your team gets a hit, you take it for them. You take responsibility publicly, you coach privately, because leadership's not a reward, it's a responsibility. Right. So I think that's the first step. If you really want people to innovate and push, you've got to make it safe for them to do so.
I think that's right. Talk to me about your gut feeling on how many leaders in corporate environments are great at taking the bullet for their team and then having a meeting and kind of going into like, okay, I took that bullet for you, but like we fucked this up. Like, is it, this is, this one woman's subjective call, but are we, I'm going to actually think of my number too, but like out of every 10 executives in these big companies, how many people really you think go there?
1 or 2.
Yeah.
And that's terrible, right? But to be fair, the corporate ladder is not designed to reward that, right?
And I'm empathetic for taking the bullet, right? It's like you have a mortgage, you have a family, you take that bullet, it might be the day where your boss decides you're gone. And so it's not conducive to that.
Exactly. So it has to go all the way to the top. If the CEO says we want innovation, it has to ladder all the way down, but you can't blame people for playing the game that they're a part of, right? And it's structured to not reward that.
Yeah, it's funny. I genuinely would argue that the 100% thing I focus on at VaynerX is to eliminate fear, because then it creates the environment to give what we're talking about a prayer. Talk to me about the flip side. You were a young, hot start executive coming up the ranks. It's probably likely that there's more people listening and watching that are in the structure of having a boss or manager. What are some clever thoughts, some emotional intelligence strategies, some nuances that one can do in empowering their boss to do that for them? Like, what if you're the junior person? What can you do to maybe make a little impact on that if it's not coming from above you, if anything?
When you have a cool idea, you have to do the work of analyzing all facets of it. the idea might be cool, but have you thought of the downsides? So sometimes I find the bright-eyed bushy tail comes in with a great idea and hasn't thought through not only the execution and the budget and the process needed, but the potential downsides. So I found when I've done this, or team members have come to me and laid out the plan, not only is this a great idea, but here's all the plan B, plan C that will happen. Here's the worst downside that we could do, but here's the big upside. It's a calculated risk at that point and far less scary. So that's huge in managing up, right? And so then not only if you have an impact within a company, if you can also show financial results, but also show how you develop leadership in the industry, how you become a case study, how you do things differently, that's another halo around that. So you got to sell it in just like any other idea.
And then outside of, because you went right to the source, the elimination of fear. I think I'll be honest with you, Andrea, I'm sorry. I want to like shut down the rest of the episode. I actually think Swan nailed it, but that's heady stuff. That's the actual answer, give me some more micro answers. What else have you seen, observed firsthand or through observation of others that also lends itself to entrepreneurial cultures? And actually, let me ask you something else in our 4 minutes. Let me pivot that. Why do you think an entrepreneurial culture matters?
It lets people do their best work. Too often in corporate, when we have too strong of a culture or too defined of processes, people fall in and you lose the edges where innovation and drive come from, right? People come in, they check in, they phone it in, and they go home. But the entrepreneurial culture, and it doesn't mean every single last person has to have that, but if you have, say, 30% of your company with that mindset, you start pushing the edges. And with the landscape changing every day, I don't care if you're not even e-commerce, but this last year has taught us that digital is the future, whether it's external to the consumer or internal to the company. And if you don't have at least 30% of your people with an entrepreneurial mindset, you just do the same thing over and over. So that's why it's important. And the thing about entrepreneurship that I've seen now that I'm in a baby startup is people are more individual in a smaller company than they are in big ones. And you have to foster that. So one of the things I've done, and I've seen other people since I started giving this advice a few years ago, is I manage people individually based on their personalities and strengths. For all my direct reports, it is a lot more work, right? Of course, we have leadership styles. You have one, I have one, and that's a blanket one. But when it comes to direct reports, I use Myers-Briggs. Now, we can debate which framework works or it doesn't. It doesn't matter. Use a framework, but you manage the person the way they do their best work, and you get the best out of them. You get their loyalty.
It's remarkably historically correct, right? If you look at business or sports, it has been very obvious that any head coach or any CEO, she or he has always been more productive and consistently productive when they're reverse engineering the human.
Yeah.
I think for me, for people that have that much empathy that are capable of that, what you have to watch out for is a lack of candor. That was my evolution going into this next chapter of my career I feel so strong because I've been building up my kind candor capability. I think when you're that empathetic that you're actually willing to reverse engineer the person, you can at times struggle with candor. It's a common trait because you're leading with optimism and positivity. And what's really fascinating about lack of candor is it actually leads back to fear because people don't know where they sit. And that's where we started this. Final thoughts, you got 60 seconds. What else should people think about with entrepreneurial cultures, whether it's an entrepreneurial venture or a corporate venture?
If you're able to do this, understanding that humans have different motivations and incentives is really important. So I can't change a corporate incentive bonus structure. What I was able to do is carve out 10%, and I let the employee choose how they want to receive that last 10%, which was under my control, right? 50% corporate, maybe 30%, 40% team, 10% what you want. Do you want more money? Do you want more vacation days? Do you want a mentoring relationship? Do you want time for a side project? That little 10% of choice lets that person stand up and say, you see me, I get rewarded in the way I want. And if that works, God, if you could roll out across a company, how would people be seen and actually work to their potential? Because it's what they're interested in.
Swan, thank you so much. Keep crushing.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Next up, we've got Lauren Milan, an award-winning marketer, entrepreneur, investor, advisor, and board member over her 15-year career. Lauren has advised and invested in over 40 startups that have generated over $1 billion in revenue to date. Lauren is now the CEO of Digital Undivided, a leading nonprofit that leverages data, programming, and advocacy to catalyze economic growth and create pathways for Black and Latinx women entrepreneurs. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you for having me, Andrea. Hi, Gary. How are you?
I'm well, Lauren, but I don't know if you know this. The Met Gala was the other night. I mean, you're bringing it. I'm impressed. You are absolutely, I mean, I'm like slumming it here. I feel like I got to do a wardrobe change. Anyway, Lauren, let's just get right into it. You know, from your perspective, you've had a lot of, you know, different angles and perspectives with the startups you've seen startups mature. You're a woman of the world, so you know that there's a lot going on in corporations, and I'm sure have plenty of executive friends and things of that nature. Talk to me about your perspective on this question. How does one create, and more importantly, sustain, right? Because I think it's easy to create when it's small. Maybe from your startup investing, what is the reality of the sustaining part once the company starts getting big?
You know, I think it's a great question, but I am going to go back very quickly to the outfit choice, because I think that we all have to show up, because we have to show up feeling confident and feeling like we're on our A game, right? So this is your brand, this is my brand,
Right.
but this is also how I have to show up in order to have that excitement for the work that I do every day, because it's not easy work to do, as I know you know well, right? There's the marketing piece.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's such a great point. That's why I just wanted to jump in. I'm sorry, but to your point, we're both doing the same thing, even though it may show up to everybody visually different. I agree with you. That self-awareness game is massive. Good for you.
Well, thank you. But I was inspired by being able to come on and chat with you, and Andrea always brings her A game in the fashion department. So I figured yes. But when we're talking about, you know, entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurial mindset, I think what is so important is to be unapologetically yourself in so many ways. I think that what often crushes entrepreneurial spirit is feeling as though the outside world is going to reject our idea, call it silly, won't see us. And so half of the battle, I do think, is making sure that you show up dressed in whatever makes you feel like a rock star, so that regardless of the feedback that you get, your spirit, your entrepreneurial spirit, your innovative spirit, which normally, hopefully, comes from deep curiosity, that nothing can deter you from that. Because if you show up feeling like, I belong, my idea is great, then you walk away from that room, if you don't get the response that you wanted, saying, oh, okay, you just don't get it. But it doesn't feel like a personal attack on who you are. And I see so many people who are bright, like insanely bright and insanely inquisitive, you know, begin to shrink because they feel as though the outside world doesn't appreciate the perspective that they bring to the table. So I always say,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, just like however you need to harness that feeling. Because I think that I've seen so many people get super excited to share something and they get one rejection and it takes away every other yes that they might have seen or heard over the years.
Lauren, in a world where school structure gives people validation every 90 days, in a world where people are worried about how many followers they have or comments, I mean, your entire manifesto right there is a singular game of the self-esteem versus insecurity framework. How does, a lot of people are listening, you drilled that. I think about this a lot because I talk about these things. How does one who didn't have the luxury, I have so many family members, cousins, uncles, my family world, the people I know the best friends, who didn't have the luxury that I had, which is I can do everything you just said because my mother instilled massive levels of self-confidence in me. How does one go from being a person that grew up in a framework of insecurity, now in their adulthood in a professional environment, turn that gear on?
That's a great one. And I think for me, I'll answer it for myself personally quickly, and then I'll give something that I think can be helpful to everyone who's tuning in. Whenever people ask me this question to Lauren Milan, my answer is always, I went through that ugly duckling phase. I mean, I had this stage of my childhood where I had braids, braces, a size 9 and 10 shoe. I was super skinny. I was everything but cool, but hip. And I wanted to fit in so many ways. And I think that, growing up, learning to kind of reject what could be bullying or any of these other things can very much turn into our superpowers as adults. 100%. I actually just posted about this recently. It's like, whoa, I mean, the amount of kids that made fun of me and called me one name after the other, was tough. Whether that was Twiggy or even, being called other names from folks, being questioned about my blackness. Those are all the things that I went through my adolescence with. And I think if you can go through a tough childhood and learn to pull those experiences into how they can be applicable in your adulthood, you garner strength from that. You garner confidence from that. Now, not everyone has that experience in their childhood. So for those people who do not have that reality, because that was a tough reality, I don't really wish it on anyone either, but I do think that for those of us that want to kind of sit here and go, oh, woe me, there are times where we can look back and say, but that made me. But surviving that means that as an adult, I can shrug other things off my shoulders or other
Lauren,
biases or stereotypes.
When I hear that, talk to me about so that's the external kid world. What was going on in your four walls? Mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, older sibling, like something was giving you the strength to navigate through that. And then, because I did the same thing, turn that into the ultimate, superpower. Like, who was giving you that foundation internally?
Absolutely my family, particularly my mother. Yes, but in particular my mother and my father, who are both, for their families, first generation, major success story in their own right. My mom was a model, first Black model to do a lot of big campaigns before there was ever a diversity conversation. My dad, one of the first Blacks on Wall Street back in the day, so much so that he had to start on the West Coast out of San Francisco because he couldn't make it to the real Wall Street until later, right? So they broke barriers in their own ways, and I watched them do that unapologetically my entire life. But I also had parents that instilled in me that I was going to often be the only in the room. And there are a lot of people, I think, that, looked at me and said, oh, you grew up privileged. Well, maybe in part, but it's also because my parents made a conscious choice. I was an only child. I got all of their resources poured into me, but the result was also that I was often the only in the room. So even now that we're having these diversity, entrepreneurial, inclusion, equity conversations, I've almost always been the only in the room my entire life. So I'm very comfortable in situations and instances that I think the outside world thinks or expects me or any other woman of color in this day and age to be uncomfortable in. And it's actually where I thrive instead. And so I think that throws a lot of people for the okie doke, if you will. But I think it's also part that entrepreneurial spirit, which is like, I'm here and you might be surprised that I'm here, but the conversation, the meeting will go on.
So to synthesize, the entrepreneurial spirit from your standpoint, framework around confidence within one's own reality is the foundational steel and concrete that one can build on top of.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Me too.
And I also think that for those people who don't have that experience in their lives, that you learn to do the things that are scary to you and you begin to almost compete with yourself. I think so much of the entrepreneurial spirit is self-competition and self-reliance, and everyone has to do something different to tap into that. With my team at Digital Undivided, I stretch them every single day. And I can tell you, the first time I stretched them on a huge project on a tight timeline, they were like, we can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. I said, we're going to remove can't from the vocabulary and we're going to learn to move things around and make it happen. And yes, it was a stressful week or two, but once we got past that, all of a sudden I look back and I have a different team immediately. I have an incrementally different team that now knows that they are capable of doing what 2 weeks ago they thought they couldn't do. And not only do they think they can do it, they saw tangibly that they could do it. And then in addition to that, they saw that the outside world valued and appreciated what we were able to do and create together. That kind of, confidence, that kind of self-awareness, that comes from, in my opinion, the accomplishment of achievement in itself. And so I think there's a lot that people want to do. That we meet a lot of people in life that go, I have an idea, but who let you try to actually execute on it? Who's allowed you to actually go implement it? Whether you fail or succeed doesn't matter, but do we actually give people the ability, the chops, the latitude, and the platform to even try to gain entrepreneurial spirit or perspective? And I think we have to allow people to try, and we also have to allow people to fail, because I think it's when they fail, you can also work backwards to say, okay, but why did I fail? And in that moment, it might feel like,
it becomes the data point, the context when you're running.
And it might feel huge, but 100%. Then you realize how you can solve for that failure. And often when you go back and you look at how do you create a solution around where you failed, it's actually a lot easier than when you're in it in that moment thinking, oh my gosh, this can't be happening to me. And I think we have to allow people that opportunity to stretch and grow if we want to foster an entrepreneurial mindset. And in closing, I'll say the entrepreneurial mindset is about being able to work within highly matrixed environments. It's also about having a certain level of autonomy to not just do, but to take something from start to finish. And we can't expect people to do things that they don't get an opportunity to try to do in the first place.
I totally agree. Lauren, thank you so much for the knowledge.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lauren. Gary, next we welcome tech founder and venture capitalist Alexis Ohanian. Alexis wrote bestseller Without Their Permission and co-founded Reddit. In 2020, Alexis founded 776, a new software-enabled venture firm focused on people, culture, and community. Welcome, Alexis.
Thank you for having me. What's up, Gary?
I'm good, brother. You get your slice of pizza. I see you coming out of the clubs, and
yeah, that was. Dude, you'll appreciate this. I brought a CryptoPunk to the Met. On the same day,
I saw.
The CEO said NFTs would never be in the Met because there's no artistic value. It's entirely commercial. And it's weird, dude. We see this play out over and over and over again where institutions really have a hard time dealing with change, especially when it's bottom up, especially when it's from the internet. And I don't know how you could be sitting here in 2021, though, and still sleep on this. And yet, most people, they're in their REM state. They're so asleep.
It's why we've always had a connection. It's why we have good things happen for us professionally, because much like your much better half on our field, like she does, we do our thing. And like sports, it just plays out. It's regardless of what the establishments and institutions say, at the end of the day, the well-executed entrepreneurial executions always win. Speaking of which, I have a really interesting question. First, thanks for being on. And I know a lot of people are happy you're on. Reddit, right? One of the most iconic, important, winners of the Web 2 era, one of the most important foundational structures in our society around community, which both you and I have been incredibly passionate about for a long time.
Day one. What
a lot of people don't know is that Reddit once sold and went into a big organization. Right.
Yeah,
and so, I actually don't know how close you were to it when the sale happened, but okay, good.
No, I did it. Good. I was the idiot who did it. Yeah.
So good. So tell me about this. You and your co-founder, you create this incredibly strong entrepreneurial company. You sell it to an organization, a bigger company. Condé Nast. It needs to live within there. And then it comes out of there and is now in its current state that people know it. I don't think anybody can speak to this better. There's 3 steps in there. The first and the third step are incredibly entrepreneurially structured.
Yeah.
And the middle one is corporate structured. So when you hear that, what's the learning for everybody of like, what happens that's pro or con when you do lose an entrepreneurial framework?
I mean, dude, look, I was 22 years old. Had been working on Reddit for 18 months, and I'd struck up a conversation with a guy at Condé Nast who eventually was like, hey man, you want to come work here? And $10 million was a crazy amount of value for 16, 17 months worth of work. Insane. And at the time, look, my mom had gotten sick. I had a lot of reasons to want to get rid of that existential dread and just make that phone call. Literally the best phone call I ever make in my life was telling her, we sold, it's done, money's in the bank. Like, this was life-changing money, more than my parents had made their entire working lives, like for a year and a half of work. It was crazy. But I did not have someone telling me, hey, Alexis, if it's going this well, you should just raise funding. At that point, we had raised $70,000. And I was so naive. I'd never hired an employee before, had never thought through any of the obvious stuff of business now. And, I stayed at Condé Nast for a little over 3 years. I left in 2010. And, it was comfortable and it was helpful, certainly during the recession and everything else, to know that I had a job and I didn't have to worry about our revenue numbers that much. I didn't have to worry, it wasn't a pressing need. It wasn't that existential dread of being a founder CEO again. But when I came back in 2014, and it was, the company had only a few $1 million in revenue. This is all public. Like, it was a tough place. And a lot of the work was then re-educating brands. I mean, I spent most of my time on planes, right? I mean, I remember coming to you again.
Of course.
It's back. It's going to take time, but we believe in this. We have an amazing team. We're going to turn this around. And that was where I really learned how to be an entrepreneur. One of the early hires there was Caitlin Holloway, who was our first VP of People and Culture there. She's a founding partner of 776. And then Lizzie Garvin, who was the chief of staff of the firm, now also with me here at 776. And we got in the trenches and had to do a lot of work to reset culture, to grow, like literally double every year in headcount, to rebuild the relationship with brands, get them to feel safe advertising on the platform. Like, the team did amazing work. And I saw firsthand what it took to grow a rapidly growing organization. And I feel like that's where it's where I got all my gray hairs. And that's where
By the way, your hairs look really good. This is the best haircut I've seen on you. This is a real legit haircut.
I got a real haircut. Thanks. My sister, everyone thinks it's for the Met. My sister's getting married this weekend, and I didn't want to distract with the mane. So Samson,
knowing you grew up in that same year as I did, a lot of our friends' companies got real, different. They did raise capital. They got big.
Yeah. Kevin did it right. I'm friends with Kevin Rose now. Kevin did it right, raising money. Yeah.
Talk to me about what you've seen from the outside of a lot of our friends' companies that went from 3-4 people in a Y Combinator, a small company, to 5,000 employees. In all your travels with all these people, back to the theme of the show, where do those founders struggle? What's the common thing where they go, they always say this thing, man, we've lost some of our speed, our entrepreneur. They wake up. I mean, Vayner, I'm fucking, me, I'm really in my shit. And like Vayner at 1,800, VaynerX at 1,500, wherever we are, 1,800, whatever the number is right now, can't be what it was when it was me and AJ in a conference room, right? What do you see as the themes or the anecdotes to when they feel they've lost their entrepreneurial spirit?
So something that stuck with me that Caitlin told me early into Reddit, this is now like 2015. She said, look, this company is going to double every year in headcount. And every year that it doubles, the culture totally changes. So be prepared for a totally new company and need to do a reset in order to maintain the stuff that got you there in the first place.
Yeah.
And so part of it is, as a CEO, trying your best to stay on top of, and this comes down to values. This sounds like cheesy stuff that my 21-year-old self would have rolled my eyes at, but values are the things that if you do them intentionally and you really develop a culture around them, they help the 1,000th person make a decision as if the founder were in the room. And it's never going to be as good, but it's the best fucking thing you can do.
It's fucking religion.
Yeah.
If you get everybody to understand that speed or kindness or break things or whatever you put on if you pound that into the soul,
put it on the wall. Yeah.
Scale. I agree.
And then it is hard, right? As organizations grow, you just invariably get bureaucracy and all this other stuff. But I think where software is going to redefine organizations going forward now is a byproduct of COVID and sort of decentralized work. Okay, we have a chance. I'm working with founders now who they're starting their company in the last year. They've started it as a remote first company because of COVID. Yes. And even as they flex back into office, their DNA is around asynchronous work. It's around sort of execution focused work, because there's no chance to have gossip around the water cooler if the org started in a digital first way.
Well, the gossip can go to Slack.
For sure. But there is the idle culture of being in an office doesn't exist. Now that has the upside. The upside is you get a chance to be more relentlessly focused on execution. The downside is you don't have as much of that natural kind of culture building camaraderie.
Right? Yeah.
And so now the work is, how do we build? I think this new generation of company is now going to look for more creative ways to create that sort of that culture, the serendipity of the office, even as they come back. Now that their DNA is formed in execution, right? Async, like, why bother having a meeting if I can just record a Loom video and you can watch me at 2x speed whenever you fucking want. And I think it's like that shift. We just have to do new work now to build culture internally.
I hate that we've run out of time. I'm gonna have to.
We already run out of time.
Yeah, these are fast.
Very.
I'm gonna hit you up, and we're gonna do a real podcast, you and I.
We need to, but I have to ask you something. Is that the first appearance of Deadpool? Is that a New Mutants comic over there?
You are very, 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 very good. Hold on one second. You mean this?
Yeah, dude, that's hilarious. I've got like 5 of those in my vault.
We need to talk comics. I love you, buddy. Thank you.
All
Talk
right.
soon.
Be well.
Thank you, Alexis. And thank you, Gary. This is awesome.
Love you. Talk to you
Love
soon.
you too. Next up, we welcome Shelly Haas, CMO of Ulta Beauty. Prior to this role, hi, Shelly, how are you?
Good, how are you?
And we've got Ryan Harwood that's going to be joining us today too. Just a little bit more about Shelly though first. Prior to her role as joining as CMO of Ulta Beauty, Shelly spent her career in consumer packaged goods with companies including Procter & Gamble and PepsiCo. 3 things that Shelly would bring with her on a desert island: SPF lotion, smokehouse almonds, and of course, lip gloss. Today, Shelly will be joined by our very own Ryan Harwood, CEO of Gallery Media Group. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Andrea. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Shelly, how's it going?
How are you?
Good. Incredible introduction, but more importantly, an incredible human. So it's so good to see you.
Really good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So being the CMO of the largest beauty retailer in the US with 1,300 stores across 50 states, it's no easy feat. Yet you're delivering record results right now with Q2 sales of almost $2 billion, which is crazy. Tell me a little bit about your mantra. What got you here won't get you there, and how your entrepreneurial mindset has led to your success at Ulta.
I think if you asked any of the leaders on my team what my biggest go-to mantra is, they'd say what got you here won't get you there. It started when I started with the company almost 7 years ago. I came in to change things. I mean, that's why I was hired. So I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? Because it was pretty clear early on that people were really comfortable in their success, because the company was already doing really well, but things were going to change. And so I latched on to that early on. You know, it's that old book that was written about career, and what got you here won't get you there in your career. But I just thought it was really good for us to latch on to that as a mantra for the team. And it's been a mantra ever since. And I'm so glad, because we've created now a culture of people that think that way. You know, they're always looking toward the future, always thinking around the corner, no matter, you know, if we deliver a $2 billion quarter that's way above expectations, it doesn't matter. What got you here won't get you there. So that's been really important, because, you know, as I was really growing the team and really pushing people and bringing in new great talent and kind of, you know, really reshaping what this looked like, that was really the cornerstone of, you know, now how we think.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny, if you create an atmosphere and culture that eliminates fear and encourages ideas from everywhere, because employees aren't fearful to contribute freely, then it fosters that entrepreneurial spirit.
Totally. It's that idea of like, just go for it. Like, everybody here should want to go for it. And if you're just hanging out, it's probably not going to be the place for you. So yeah, it's just a different mindset, all about the mindset.
So, you know, when you are looking to hire, to get people with that mindset, or at least people you can mold into that mindset, are there any unique qualities you look for or screen against specifically?
I mean, the first one, you know, Alexis just touched on this, and he kind of said, like, it might sound cheesy, because if, you know, you said this to your 21-year-old self, they'd be like, oh my God. But values is like the first thing, because I think that you shouldn't hire people just like you, except in the area of values. Because the idea of having like people who are really authentic, who care about team, who care about culture, who care about the values of the company, and it's going to be like a number one priority, that's like, has to be there. Deal breaker if it's not there. If you do, and a lot of that is a gut feel. I mean, you can try to like screen for that and ask questions for that, but it's tough. You get a gut feel about people. And, you know, you said good human being. I mean, you got like good human beings that are like no drama, like has to be. Then on top of that, like the idea of being innovative and creative, but more than that, kind of like if you're a change agent, it's about the how. especially when it comes to doing it in a values-based way, and really getting an understanding for how those people wire. I always call it like wire an organization, because it's tough to wire an organization, especially when you're doing new stuff. So the ability to do that and create that change is what I look for in leaders when I bring them in or when I grow them up throughout our marketing organization.
Totally. I have a fun one here. How would you handle integrating a former marketer into your team if they had been frozen in time for 50 years and now they're coming back into society and they're joining your team, but they were a former marketer? How would you integrate them?
First of all, I feel like this is a good seed of an idea for a Netflix show. Do you feel like that? Like, I feel like that could be a really interesting thing. I don't know. I think you have to be on the forefront of culture. And so if you're gone for 50 years, holy crap.
Yeah.
So we just talked about Reddit. I would say get on every social media platform and devour it. Get into Reddit, get into TikTok. Like, you got to just devour everything that's going on there and talk to kids.
Yeah.
Talk to teenagers, talk to the 20-somethings. I have two of them who are 21 and 19, and they're always like, Mom, you need to do this, you need to do that. And they just know. So, if you're frozen in time, come back and talk to kids.
Totally. It's funny. When I was growing up, it used to be the older people used to influence change and decisions. You looked up to people that were older than you. I feel like now in this generation, the younger people influence the older people more than it used to be. It's super
100%. It's like reverse mentoring.
Yep.
I have a lot of the experience and wisdom and ability to, lead the organization, but I don't have all that. So we gotta bring those two pieces together to make the magic.
How do you think consumers' attitudes towards beauty and makeup have changed during the pandemic?
This has been a super interesting time in beauty, because beauty is really emotional and really meaningful. But over the last year and a half, it's become way more of that. The idea of self-care and that tie to beauty. Where people were at home and feeling lost and anxious. The self-care routines, and not just with skincare, but that was a big part of it, but even with makeup, with hair care, like that whole self-care thing just accelerated even more. And so that's a really interesting space for us. Now people are coming out of the pandemic-ish and feeling like they want to feel new again. So then they're looking at beauty, in a different way. It has a different meaning now that people are trying to get to like this balance of FOMO and what we call FOGO, fear of going out, fear of missing out, fear of going out, fine line. So, it's really fun to see people engaging in new ways and getting excited about beauty in new ways because of what's happened over the last year and a half.
Totally.
Pretty wild.
Yeah. I remember you, when we were having a conversation off the cuff, you were telling me a little bit about Ulta's See Beautiful Today platform that you launched like 3 weeks within lockdown. How did both speed and flexibility and listening to your consumers contribute to that campaign's success?
Yeah, that goes back to the entrepreneurial mindset, 100%. First of all, I look back and I'm like, thank God we worked so hard to get our A team together, both in our Ulta Beauty team as well as on our agency side. Because if we wouldn't have had that, I don't know, the whole thing probably would have imploded. But because we had that, and because we had done so much work on our brand purpose platform, like we're a purpose-driven brand, and the idea of being able to use the power of beauty to bring out the possibilities in every person is our true north. And that gave us the ability then to say, okay, we hadn't planned a new campaign until September, but like stuff's going down right now and people need, something to lift them up. And this idea that we could really be the light in people's, darkness and anxiety led us to the idea that, beauty's all around us and we were going to see beautiful today and do it together. So we just busted a move within 3 weeks and used, UGC because we can shoot anything. And that was awesome because it just led to a completely different mindset. We used that platform throughout the year and put out new content all year long. And we did it in different ways, whether it was UGC or remote shoots. I always say, like, don't forget the lessons of 2020, because it taught us a lot about being entrepreneurial and breaking things. Like, you can move that fast. You don't need a brief. Like all the things that you and I have talked about before.
Speed is the game. Speed of ideation, speed of execution. It is the game these days. I saw all the news about Ulta Beauty at Target, that partnership. It was super cool to see that. I'm so curious, how did that come to be? How did that partnership allow Ulta to be more accessible to consumers, strengthen the brand, all of it?
Yeah, I'm so excited about the partnership. We just launched a few weeks ago. We have 100 stores, 100 store-in-stores now. It really started from the idea that we're an innovative company. Target is an innovative company. We are also two brands that have a lot in common when it comes to the consumer and when it comes to the ethos of the brands. And so the idea of bringing the best of Target, omnichannel retail, 30 million people through the doors every week, Target runs, and the beauty prowess and expertise and perception of Ulta Beauty together to make this like retail powerhouse is really where it started. And I just, like, speaking of speed, I mean, this is like, we just announced this last, I think it was November, and we just launched like a brand new retail environment, new .com experience, like breaking the paradigm. I mean, we really moved. And I'm really proud of the experience that we're creating in the store. It's very Ulta Beauty, but it's also very Target. It's really intimate, cool. Like, I'm just so excited about what we have in front of us.
Andrea, could I do a quick speed round with Shelly really quickly?
We're already a minute over. You know what we're going to do? We're going to have a show just with you guys.
Okay.
We're going to do it.
You're awesome.
We have so much to talk about.
I know. It's so true.
All right.
I can't thank you guys enough.
Awesome. Thanks.
Shelly, good to see you.
Our next host is Zach Nadler, CEO of Vayner Speakers. And we're so excited to have Haley Rosen, the CEO of Just Women's Sports, join us. Coming from a professional career in soccer, Haley has now changed the game for women's sports coverage. Just Women's Sports is a digital-first consumer media platform providing 7 million passionate fans with in-depth coverage of women's sports. And it's been growing 300% year over year. Welcome to you both.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrea. Haley, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thanks for that intro. That was great.
Well, since Ryan cut our time a little short, I'm going to try and jump right in. But before we go into that, tell me, before we dive into the theme, just give us the quick 30 seconds on Just Women's Sports.
Yeah, Just Women's Sports is exactly what the name says. We cover just women's sports. And it's kind of touched on in the intro, but the whole idea is, 4% of sports coverage is dedicated to women's sports. But that doesn't match what's happening in the space. Attendance is up, viewership is up, general interest is up, participation is up. And so there's this huge sort of unmet opportunity to really cover women's sports. And that's what we're doing.
That's incredible. Yeah, you guys are killing it right now. And obviously, Andrea mentioned it, your background, you played D1 soccer at Stanford, you were a professional soccer player. With today's theme around culture, I'm curious, what similarities have you seen from, working in a team as a culture and then creating a company and building the culture around that?
Yeah, I think this is really an area where sports and work really, really overlap. And I think there's two things that I think are just hold true for both. One is, knowing, what you're doing, knowing your mission, knowing your purpose. When you're on a team, usually, you want to win the league, you want to win the national championship, right? The goals are really, really clear. So making the goals really, really clear for the company, where you're heading, where you want to go, and in what time frame, I think that is just really critical. And I've seen that really drive culture, both on a team and in the workforce. And then second is, empathy. When you're on a team, you can't help but just empathize and feel for your teammates, right? Like, you're on the line doing fitness and someone's struggling, like you're giving them a push, or maybe someone's pushing you, or, you're showering in the locker room. Like, you bond and you get to know these people and who they are inside and out. And I think that does matter. And that's, it's tough as you scale, but I think just generally leading with empathy and, treating everyone as people that have their own, hopes and dreams and needs, but want to function as a team. Like, that for me, is just very clear as day, just in sports and in work.
That's great. Well, you're certainly speaking our language. Empathy is in our DNA here at all the Vayner companies. And another thing that we have in common, I think, is the passion that comes from our founder, right? Gary is very passionate about the work that we do. And I think you're super passionate about women's sports. And I'm curious, in the world of culture, how do you kind of build a culture around that passion so that all your employees and the entire company feels that same way?
You know, Zach, this is like a really good question. I don't know, but it's the only thing that we've done because I love it. Like my heart is on my sleeve. We are fighting for this day in and day out. We believe in the mission with every fiber of our being. And I think that we attract people that feel that too, that they see it on our Instagram or they see it in our podcast or hear it in our podcast. They see it in the way we talk. Like they get it. They feel that thing that we're feeling too. And it just has built from there. And I think, you know, as we scale and as we grow, like, we want to keep attracting those people and we want to sign them up to be on our team and keep growing that passion. Because, you know, for us, like we're 15 people right now and we want to compete with media organizations that are hundreds of people, right? And to do that, we're going to have heart and hustle and passion. And I think we have that in spades. And for us, it's just to keep pushing on that.
That's awesome. And I mean, this kind of goes, Alexis touched on this a little bit about companies today, you know, being together all virtually. You started this company during the pandemic. So your team of 15 people, you're not spending every day together. And frankly, you guys don't spend that much time together in person. So how do you navigate creating this culture that you've built while everyone is all over the country?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we've only known this way. And I think just for us, like this sounds maybe cheesy, but setting up like really good operational processes of, you know, having certain meetings on the calendar, like from literally just, you know, weekly one-on-ones or monthly one-on-ones, just really being diligent around when do we need to communicate? When do we need to communicate live? When does something need to come off of Slack or off of email and needs to be a phone call? You know, and we're learning as we go. But I think for us, it's like the North Star is just empathy and teamwork. And so, you know, something we also say is assume positive intent. So if you're going back and forth on Slack and something's getting crazy, it's like, take a breath, pick up the phone, give that person a call because, you know, we're all on the same team. So I think, you know, it's something we're figuring out, but I think getting our operational processes tight and finding times for virtual happy hours as much as no one wants to log on to Zoom at 5 p.m. Like it does matter and it makes a difference. And, you know, we'll keep learning and growing as we go.
I love that. And I think like the teamwork you've built, like your empathy is right there. You said you're wearing it on your sleeve. Like it's 100% in the way that you built this whole thing. Have there been challenges that you've seen around that? Because I love the idea of positive intent, but obviously things can go wrong. So have there been things that, you know, you would have done differently or things that you look forward to doing differently in the future?
Yes, of course.
Like a true founder. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, we've made a ton of mistakes. Like something we also say, and I'm realizing how many things we say now that we're having this conversation, but is, you know, we don't have to get it right the first time, but we have to be the fastest to learn. So like we can make mistakes, but we need to learn quickly. And so we have made so many mistakes, like internally, externally, you know, big decisions, little decisions, like probably made 2 mistakes today. Like, you know, that's part of it. But for us, it's just about learning quickly. And I think, you know, to go back to sports, like something that people say is, you know, next one or next touch. Like there was a thing in soccer, at least when you would turn over the ball, it'd be like, go get it back, go make the next one good. And I feel like that's really kind of a culture that I want to bring into, you know, just women's sports of like, all right, maybe that wasn't the right call, but what did we learn and how do we make the next one right? And like, we just keep pushing on that.
I mean, just jumping right off of that, you guys have already built this company. You're 15 people. I know you're growing and you're competing with behemoths. So as you guys continue to grow, how do you actually plan to keep that culture sustained? Because obviously, you know, the more stretched you get, the tougher it gets. So do you have any plans or ideas around how you'll continue to do that? I think having an incredibly clear mission matters so much. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around our mission and where we're going in this vision. 100%. I think every single person could recite the things I say over and over and over, but I think we're all bought in and we get it. And I think that really, really matters. And then I think also just, you know, from the top down, from the bottom up, I keep coming back to empathy. Like, I just think, and listen, I'm early in these days, but from everything I've seen, it really for us is it's mission and empathy, like 100%. Treat people like teammates, care about each other, work hard, you know, be accountable to one another and know where you're going. We know where we're going, no doubt. And like, we just got to push to get there. That's incredible. Well, you mentioned speed, you mentioned where you're going, and I'm excited to see you guys go there. I appreciate you jumping on with us here. Thanks for your time.
Zach, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Thank you, Haley and Zach. You guys are awesome. Amazing. Our next host is the one and only Wanda Pogue, VaynerMedia's Chief Strategy Officer. And we welcome Mark Hans Richer, the SVP, Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer at Moen, leading the smart water revolution for over 5 years. Previously, Mark Hans was Harley-Davidson's first ever CMO. And a fun fact, Mark Hans taught pygmies in the Congo how to sing YMCA. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. And hello, Mark Hans. It's so good to see you again.
Nice seeing you.
I think with that little thing, that little bit of information that Andrea just shared, I almost want to go off script completely and have you talk about that, but I'll try and stay very focused. More than 10 minutes. We had the opportunity to meet briefly and had a great chat. And I think you shed such great light on the differences between being an entrepreneur and entrepreneurialism and intrapreneurialism. I would love to be able to start there, and just what is the difference? What is intrapreneurialism?
Yeah, this is a huge passion point for me. And I think it is an important distinction because people fall in love with the idea of entrepreneurialism, and I think sometimes misunderstand what you're talking about. They fall in love with companies that are inherently entrepreneurial, which are very rare. Startups or in creative industries that are like that. And much more often the opportunity is within a company that's already well established. They're a legacy company. They've been around for decades. They've got well established processes and all kinds of things, and people that have been hired to protect those things that have been built up and frankly have built the success of the company up to that point. And so when you're an entrepreneur, you have to work within a legacy company to figure out how to make transformational change while also running the play of the company and the success drivers that got them to that point. So people have this dream, this fantasy of, well, I'm going to be in this entrepreneurial culture and it's just going to be wild and crazy. We're just going to do whatever we want and it's just going to grow and it's going to be great. And that is actually a very rare experience. The much more likely experience is to be in a larger company where you're trying to do that same thing, but within a larger cultural construct that is harder to work within.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that, because I think, some people may say, well, it's actually easier. You have the support of an already established organization, but I'm sure it comes with a lot of challenges as well. So what are some of the challenges in, perfect example, a Moen, a company 65 years old with over 3,500 employees. How do you inject, the culture of entrepreneurialism?
Yeah. Well, this has been something I've just been kind of involved with my whole career, at General Motors, at Harley, and now at Moen. And they're, General Motors, 100 years, Harley, 115 years, Moen is actually 80 years. And all of them have had great successes and yet also challenges and opportunities for change. And the issue is really, everybody really likes change, the idea of it. But when it comes down to what does that really mean and what does that mean to me if I was hired 10 years prior and my responsibility is not to screw anything up, and that's basically what I've been told to do. That's what my job description says is run the play, please try not to lose. Change can be scary, and it's not because anyone's dumb or anything. It's just that this is what they've been incentivized to do. So that's actually the biggest challenge, is the mindset shift. Not because someone's bad or good, but just because they've been incentivized to run a play a certain way, and they've gotten used to that and been rewarded for that. And now you're asking them to do something different. And the truth of the matter is, and there's been a decent amount of research on this, is that within a corporate culture, only about 15% of the people are actually intrapreneurs. People that have the sort of will to make more transformational change. And the other 85% are not. But again, it's not about good or bad. It's about, how do you change the focus? How do you change the incentives? How do you inspire and also enable, and not just inspire, but really enable a culture to liberate more of the power of the 15%, not because of the people, but because of what that will do ultimately for the business.
Yeah, in the very beginning, Gary and Swan spoke about, creating a safe environment. Do you think that that's important in order to be able to, kind of foster the spirit, of innovating and maybe deviating from what's been done in the past? How important is creating, that level of safety among the employees and ensuring people feel safe? And then how are you doing that?
Yeah, this is kind of the go-to thing now because Google came out with their study and talked about psychological safety. And, I got to say there's a little bit more to it than that. And again, it's easier in startup companies. It's easier when you have a leader like Gary who can just declare everything from on high and everybody has to act that way. When you're starting in an organization that you're not running, and you are surrounded by 85% of the people who are not going to get psychologically safe, it's going to take a lot longer for them to get psychologically safe. The ability for you to actually change is very, very small if that's what you're waiting for. It's not going to happen because it's just too big of a company to try to get everybody on that same plane of understanding and feeling that level of safety to make that kind of change. If you're truly pushing bigger change, nominal changes, yeah, you can do that. And then if you do get a whole team that's feeling safe and executing well, they're surrounded by a bunch of other teams that may not be on the same plane. And you have to work with them. In a big company, you've got to work with a lot of different people and you have to bring them along and you have to respect their point of view, which might be, hey, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to go that fast, or I don't want to make that change. And so you have to respect, understand, and then find a way to bring them along in a way that actually might never make them totally psychologically safe. But they have to be part of enabling the change, or else you're never going to get to the change. So it can't be that simplistic in a larger organization.
Our agility, and everybody talks about agility, nimbleness, being able to decide fast, fail fast. How much of a struggle is that, like in a larger corporation? And are there any pieces of advice, for still being able to move fast, which is critical, but doing it in a way that allows you the time to bring people along, as you were saying, or to just have due diligence?
Yeah, I think people are okay with failing fast as long as they know it's for the bigger purpose that we're seeking. If you're just trying stuff, breaking stuff, trying to move fast, agile that way, but no one really understands why there's glass all over the floor and what it was for, then it becomes more of a feeling of, why did you do that? Why'd you break that stuff? So I think it really starts not so much, Agile has to be in service to something bigger that people can understand, the clarity of focus, the big, hairy, audacious goal, to use an older term. If people understand what they're going for, then it's a lot easier to be agile and to move, and then failure isn't so scary because you feel like it's failure in service to something that everybody's signed up for. If it's really just moving around, acting fast, breaking things for the sake of, looking fast or being fast without that larger purpose objective, then it probably won't last very long.
Right. Which makes total sense. In terms of concrete examples, since you've been at Moen, that you might be able to share in different ways that you've been able to innovate, whether it's new partnerships, new acquisitions, and any kind of examples that you can give of how you've recently have done it. Because I think sometimes people think innovation only means, creating something new. Are there different ways that you've been innovating at Moen?
Well, Milan has a lot of great people at it and a lot of really smart, creative people. The best example I can give you is actually the most recent one, which we literally just launched this week. So I know I'm not supposed to be on here pimping stuff, but I'm going to kind of do it because to your question. We had a team inside of our company that developed a great AI tool, and the AI tool was built to recognize faucets. A lot of times people call into their service center and they don't really know what model of faucet they have. They may have bought the house and not the actual faucet themselves. They adopted the faucet when they got in there and they're looking for help, but we can't really help them very well because we don't know what they're talking about, because there's no easily identifiable marks on it. So this wonderful gentleman developed this, and some other folks around him developed this tool, AI Faucet Recognizer, basically, which is harder to do than you'd think. And because there's always a lot of clutter around faucets, and it's not easy for AI to recognize things that well. So once they sort of hone the tool, we said, well, this is a wonderful opportunity to go direct to our consumers and let them know that this is available so that they can have a direct relationship with us, and also, of course, highlight the innovative tool that we've developed internally, and focus on the great faucets that we have. So we built a great new commercial. It just came out this week, and it basically features the faucet identifier, the Moen identifier, which is now enabling people to take their phones and take pictures of their faucets and send them directly to us, and then we can serve them better. So It's technology and innovation in service of a brand ideal and in direct service of our consumers, which has not been done before in our industry. Frankly, I don't think it's been done in many industries. So it was not a let's do AI for the sake of AI. It's let's do AI in a way that's really meaningful to our brand identity and a direct relationship with our consumer. And so we're very excited about it, and have already had more than 1,000 people reach out with pictures of their faucets to us in just the last couple of weeks. So it's been pretty cool to see.
That's amazing, and very consumer centric. And I think that's the heart,
exactly.
At the heart of everything. Last question. How do you prevent failure, from hindering innovation and that entrepreneurial spirit for the future?
Yeah, it's just not being too heavy about it, and not even calling it failure. It's just something else we learned. Great phrase that I love is only make new mistakes. And so, all right, we made a mistake, book it. Let's learn from that. Let's not repeat the mistake. We learned it. Let's not relearn it. That would be bad. But let's go make some new ones, and it's okay. So, only make new mistakes is a real mantra. We've talked a lot about mantras on this call, and that's one for me that always sticks with me is, mistakes are okay as long as you learn from them.
Love that. Love that. I think those are great words to be able to part on. Thank you so much, Marc-Hans.
Thanks, Wanda.
Thanks to you both.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Wanda. And thanks everybody for joining the Marketing for the Now. And we're hoping you'll join us on October 19th for our next episode from 12 until 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And please check out our past recordings on Marketing for the Now at mftn.vaynerx.com. And we'd love to hear from you. So give us your ideas, your thoughts at marketingforthenow@vaynerx.com. And we will see you soon. Thanks.